Hello, I'm Theodore Bouloukos, and we're at the Scope Art Fair in New York. And I'm with the editors of the Daily Constitutional, John Henry Blatter and Mr. Derek Coté, who have also provided a sound installation to the Scope Art Fair. That's a kind of reverberating New York sound that says New York, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The funny thing is this morning we were at the Armory Show, and no one other than Michael Bloomberg, the mayor, said something like New York is the center of the art world, if not the universe.
Oh, yeah.
And
we New Yorkers feel that way.
That was right before I met you.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, like, maybe the piece does have something to do with the art world.
Okay.
Also sort of like where we are, wouldn't you say, John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we're at and what's going on.
Yeah, I would say that would be a good assessment. Of
Well, did you tape it and then you dubbed it somehow with some sort of beat?
Well, the entire sound piece is made up of just the words New York.
Okay.
And then taking just those words and manipulating them into the 4-channel installation.
So if you imagine two words, deconstructing them, making noise and sound out of those words, and then bringing them back in.
Like beatboxing.
Yeah, beatbox for the new millennium.
Right. Or for New York.
3000.
Yeah. Even though you're from Richmond, which is very generous of you.
Is that right?
I think so.
We're generous? We're generous.
You could have said, Virginia is for lovers.
Virginia is for lovers and artists.
Right. Now tell us a little bit, well, we can talk more about your sound installation, but, well, how is it that you decided to do that here? But then I want to talk about your magazine, too, because I think it's really a wonderful piece of literature.
Well, first of all, I'd rather call it a publication.
A publication. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Publication.
That's all right. It's okay.
Yeah.
So what's the question again?
Yeah, what was it? I'm sorry. How did you? Okay, you're a collective of artists in Richmond who decided to put a publication together. You were tired of reading a lot of sort of critical screed from people who weren't practicing artists. You decided that artists needed to become vocal and.
Well, I think you should answer that question.
Yeah, I think you should.
I guess it was, like being around so much. I mean, there used to be a time when artists used to write and they used to publish, and you can look back at like the Dada and all these movements before, and it seems to be nowadays that all of the writing and all of the talking about art that takes place is all done by gallerists or critics or curators or museum people, that the artists aren't really saying anything anymore. So the idea was sort of to provide a venue then for artists to be able to talk about what it is they do, or to use the publication format to do projects that would speak to that. And that was the biggest reason for an open call, to allow everybody to, to submit. And
what about artists who are bad writers? I mean, it's like academics are notoriously bad writers.
Too,
Are you? Do you finesse the work somehow with your editorial skills?
We actually don't edit the work at all.
Oh, you don't?
We spell check, of course, but we don't really feel like editing the artist's words.
So
would
it's
serve their,
and it's almost surrealist.
It's not us talking.
It's really almost surrealist because it's sort of automatic writing, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we sort of see it as a collaboration. People submit to us texts, and then we put them together with, we group it and we arrange it, and we sort of try to make.
You're kind of like collages.
Essentially.
It is very much a collaboration between us and the people who submit. Like the submissions that we get, we use as the raw material then to put together a publication piece that comes out.
Now, are you're both artists yourselves, right? What are your media?
My medium for the past 10 years has been predominantly video installation and sound installation. Okay. So very much a media-based artist.
And what in your videos, are they narrative at all, or?
Most of my work, except for the collaborative stuff recently, has been a narrative work, usually as myself as the subject. So I guess
self-referential, I'd say.
Really?
Self-exploratory,
self-masturbatory. Yes. Right. That's the best. It's onanistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a self-contained unit.
Right.
But I'd say
we've all got one of those. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Now, what is your primary thing?
I primarily came from an object-making background, objects leading to installations interest in sound, like bringing in little bits of like really lo-fi stuff in the early days. And then I met John, and we sort of met and said, hey, we both like sound, let's do a piece. And we did a piece about 2 years ago, maybe a little longer. And that started, sort of gotten us, basically that's what got us here. We're like, yeah,
well, you know what's interesting is that you both come from video installation or just installation backgrounds, and yet the piece is atmospheric, but it isn't really. It doesn't have. It's not environmental, shall we say, or it doesn't have an environment that's constructed. The environment is created by the sound.
Yeah, that's.
Was that intentional?
Yeah, that is.
Could you have created a kind of a mise en scène for it, or some sort of dioramic, surrounding, so that it would it have any more or less import if you had?
I mean, that's a good question, and some of my work has been like object-based installations with sound, which is sort of like what you're talking about. But what John and I sort of do as a collaboration is sort of we get a site like this, for example, or Miami a few months ago, and we make a piece specifically for that site. So we deal with the implications of not just the site, but the atmosphere, the cultural atmosphere, the sort of tone of the event itself. And not to say that the piece is a critique, but it definitely addresses what's going on. Kind of like the magazine does, but in a different format.
But what is going on?
I plead the fifth on that one.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are talking about that, and it's really interesting. I think something good's going to happen soon.
Oh, really? That's almost
Let's just say something big.
premonitory. What are we talking about?
And in Miami, I think the next big trend is going to be sock art.
Oh, is that like a sock hop?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you envision the Daily Constitutional as being a kind of a collective that then spawns a sort of art commodified extension, and maybe, Daily Constitutional makes movies, and you make, are you branding it in some way? And is this an extension of that branding?
I think to some degree. I mean, we would like to do a lot more than just the publication itself.
Well, we curated an exhibition a year ago from the submitting artists, like curating not their writings but their work.
Okay.
So we'd like to produce or create more opportunities for artists that don't come through the regular channels, let's say. Like the show that we put together, none of these artists would have ever known or heard of each other if it wasn't for the fact that they submitted openly to print their writings, to print their thoughts and feelings on paper.
I think what's really interesting is that you're in Richmond, and living in New York as I do, there is a sense that it is the center of the universe, and sometimes we have a bias towards it that is a little bit. Well, it's jingoistic, it's myopic, it's incredibly insular, and I know my hometown of Albany, New York, has a sort of an underground artist collective, and they do all kinds of things. And it's interesting. I'm wondering if this is a trend among mid-sized or smaller cities.
Well, I think art's happening everywhere, all the time.
Oh yeah. I'm not that naive.
It's just a matter of who's watching.
Or cynical.
Yeah. Who's watching, or how do you even know what's going on unless somebody sort of raises their hand and says, "Hey, there's some art going on over here. Come check it out."
But I think that there's even a more, I would say, a more aggressive movement to apprehend art and own it in terms of scene and centrality, so that it's not just that the goal is to come to New York. The goal may be to come to New York for some artists, but other people are creating habitable, enjoyable, satisfactory arts collectives and communities in their own smaller cities that have nothing to do with ambitions of New York.
Is that a question?
Well, it's a statement that you might philosophically comment on. Or not.
Think, John?
Or turn it over to John.
Well, I guess having never lived in New York, I guess I put that out there first, is I haven't lived in New York as of yet. It's always been the Midwest or the South.
But you're planning to live here?
I don't I don't know that I am.
Well, the funny thing is like, I have lived in New York, and you haven't. So like maybe that's part of what works really well with our chemistry, or with sort of like the way he thinks and the way I think, bouncing things back and forth.
Why did you leave?
I left because... Why did I leave? I mean, I left to go back to school, but I also left because I needed to, you know, have more free time. I needed to spend more time on my work. I needed to work less for the man and make more work.
Yeah, and and you're making more work?
I'm making more work. I definitely have more time to make art. I come to New York enough. I'm not going to say that being in New York doesn't have its advantages, or its perks, but you know, change is good. Different scenery is good. It's good for the mind, or whatever.
Do you, may I ask you what how much it costs to put together a single issue? I mean, do you raise that with fundraising, or do you get a grant for it, or is it something? Is it out of pocket?
So
is it significant?
It's within reason. The first 2 issues. Well, that's how we come about the price of the magazine. $4.28 was our actual production cost for the very first issue we put out. Since then, we've got a better handle on it. Okay. But
$4 for the whole thing?
No, per issue.
Oh, per issue. $4.20 is what it cost you to make
every copy.
Okay, and the print run is what?
2,000 is our
2,000. Okay.
But so far, it's with the 3rd issue, which came out this winter. We started selling some advertising to help offset the cost a little bit, but because it's so far it's been out of my pocket for the most part.
Is advertising okay, or is that leaning too toward the man?
Yeah, that's funny. When we first started, we were totally against it. But,
I bet you were. Yeah. Suddenly we find ourselves spreading our legs.
If you wanted to donate some money, maybe we could drop a couple ads.
Oh, well, I might have to think about that. Yeah, depending on my salary at Vernissage. Yeah. Right, Arno? Yeah. He nods silently.
We would like to do more, and I guess it's been difficult. You know, like we could go the nonprofit route, which we've looked into, but the only problem is giving up some of the freedom to like a board and all the oversight, where, you know, working the way we do now, you know, gives us the freedom to do, you know, exactly what we want. Anything we want.
Right. Well, I appreciate your time with us.
We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Till 9 o'clock.